everybody, welcome back. We're starting a new build on the channel today with this pair of Tamiya Tomcats, one an A and one a D. The A is a commission build, the D is for myself, and as you can see from the condition of the box, the D's been in the stash for quite a while, and I thought when I got the opportunity to build the A on commission, I thought it'd be a good idea to do the D at the same time, get it out of the stash, dust it down and get it going. I did a double build the year before last when I built a pair of Airfix Gannets, and actually the effort that it takes isn't twice as much. You've got quite a bit of efficiency in building two at the same time. What I'm going to have to be careful of is not to get the parts mixed up for the differences between the A and the D models, so we're going to have to be on our toes with doing that. So those are the two kits. These have been previewed and reviewed lots of times on the internet and here on YouTube, so we're not going to go into a detailed look at the kits. They're very well documented. I am going to be using quite a range of aftermarket parts. This is for both kits, and I'll leave a list of them, of what I'm going to use for the two versions in the video description below the video. So there's quite a bit here. There's going to be more on the A than there is on the D. I'm not so much bothered by putting lots of aftermarket on my own build, but the commission's going to be fairly well stacked out with aftermarket. So as I said, I'll do the list for you if you want to see what's going to be fitted, and I'll obviously refer to them in detail when we come to use them during the build. The two schemes that I'm going to be doing are contained on these two sheets. The first one is from Furball Aero Design. This is for the A, and we're going to be picking up this low vis, or a fairly low vis version here, 160408 bureau number, and that's in a two-tone light ghost grey and dark ghost grey camouflage scheme. So that's the A. The D, I'm going to contrast that with this high vis scheme for VF31, the Tomcatters. So add a little bit of contrast, and I wanted something nice and clean for my shelves. The A in the low vis will be a bit more grimy. So this is the first time I've come across this company. It's called DXM Decals, Double Excellent Model Decals. But they're printed by Cartograph, as are the Furball design decals as well, so we shouldn't have too much difficulty applying those. Both sheets come with stencil data, so we don't have to bother with any extra data sheets, and obviously these will dispense completely with the Tamiya decal sheets, so I'll have a few spares there. So we're going to kick off this first episode by putting together the first few construction steps, and that'll involve mainly the cockpits, the two cockpits, and we'll be able to pick up the differences between the two models as we do that. So let's get the boxes open and the parts cut out, and we'll make a start. Now we're going to have to be careful not to get the parts mixed up between the two kits, because it's slightly unusual that the variations in the plastic are sometimes catered for by a separate sprue, which is no problem, but sometimes the parts from the A version have been modified to bring it up to D spec. So for example, the vertical tail surfaces are the same sprue in both kits, but the D one's been modified with the reinforcement plates, so we're going to have to be careful not to get things mixed up here. We'll be using a Quinta Studios interior 3D decal set on both models, so these side consoles are going to have to be cleared. The control columns here are different parts in the two kits, and I'm looking at them struggling to tell the difference between the two. Now I've got it, it's just the grip at the top that's different. For the side consoles, I'm going to remove the detail straight away in preparation for the interior 3D decals, which are these. But it's just as well sometimes to refer to the decal that you're going to be fitting, just to make sure you don't remove any detail that needs to remain. So just cross-reference the 3D decal instructions with the actual decal that we're going to be using, and that will tell us exactly how much of the detail to remove. Get them glued on as soon as they're prepped. There's quite a bit of the F-14 cockpit that has these panels that are covered with what look like canvas, and the Tamiya kit parts are a little bit too smooth, so we're going to see if we can improve on those a little bit, make them look a little bit more realistic if we can. Now Tamiya give us the option here with these panels in the rear cockpit for different fits of the aircraft. We want the one with the lantern pod, so this panel just drops in there. The other option is for a tarps equipped aircraft. So our aeroplane has a kind of a joystick control in the left hand side of the rear cockpit. Okay, all the consoles prepared there. Just repeat that for the A. I'm just going to continue stripping off the detail from these console pieces, ready for the Quinta Studios 3D decals. Just a little tip, it's sometimes easier to leave a little bit of the sprue, and it just gives you something to hold on to whilst you're clearing the detail. And once it's ready to fit, just cut it off. So I'm just using a half round blade to get into the corners of this instrument panel. This is the pilot's instrument panel. The shape of it means that you can't get in with a file to clear it out, so some careful work with a knife. This transparency in the kit is designed to represent the display screen, the radar screen, whatever it is. But Tamiya also give you a decal to fit over that, so I'm not quite sure why they've done it in clear. In any event, our 3D printed parts give us the glossy screen anyway, so we don't need to worry about that. It's just structural really. So we can paint that along with the rest of the Rio's instrument panel. So I'll do a quick check fit of the cockpit into the fuselage. So we get the forward section in the Tamiya kit. In the Tamiya kit, the cockpit sits on the nose gear bay roof, which is this part. And even though I'm fitting a 3D printed undercarriage bay set, I'll just cut the Tamiya parts out just so that I can do that test fit. Obviously we won't be using most of these parts when we come to finish the A off. So in the kit, the undercarriage walls go together like Lego really, they just clip together. And then that locates into the fuselage half with these really strong, really positive locations, these pegs. I'm not going to be using the kit seats, but I'll just pop them together just so that we can see what the cockpit will look like in bare plastic. We've got some resin seats to fit. So those are the kit seats. Obviously we've not got any seat belts on those, they're just provided as decals in the Tamiya kit. But the seat themselves aren't too bad at all. A bit of careful painting, you could make something of those. So this is the A cockpit before we've added any extra detail to it. It's more or less out of the box. Obviously we've taken off some of the detail from the panels. And here we've got the D. The most obvious difference is the seats and the different panels, particularly in the rear cockpit. Okay, so we're just preparing the forward nose fuselage halves at the moment, and I just want to talk a little bit about these insert pieces which are provided in the Tamiya kit. This is a piece of design that Tamiya do really well. They fit as though they're just part of the original moulding really, they do them so well. But they provide them separately because throughout the Tomcat's life, these vents here, which were the exhaust gas vents for the guns, came in different styles. And this is the latest style with the NACA ducts in them. earlier styles had a kind of a grill, which you can see in the Tamiya part, which is provided in the A version of the kit. The D version gives us the later style, but our A also had the later style of duct, but it's not provided in the A kit. So we've got this exterior detail set from Minicraft Collection, and that provides actually all three main styles of gun gas purge vents. And actually, if you're using one of the earlier style, these are much nicer than the Tamiya kit. The grills are actually cast open or printed. These are 3D printed open, so they're a lot nicer than the Tamiya equivalents. This is the part that we need, which is the duplicate of the Tamiya D part. So hopefully this will fit in just as well as the Tamiya part. We'll see in a moment. So let's get this off the frame. It's the first time I've used this company, and one impressive thing about them is the finesse of the 3D printing supports. They basically, as you can see, just break away with a sharp knife. This is actually superior to the Tamiya equivalent. The grill at the rear here is open in the 3D print. This set incidentally provides the other vents on the airframe in that open grill type style, so they'll improve the Tamiya kit as well. Okay, so with a little bit of honing we can just get that part to fit nice and flush. So we're using CA for this, it's a resin part. Whilst we've got the part out, we'll also fit the Tamiya. Now just thinking ahead to fitting this, which is the Wheelbay set from Minicraft Collection, and this will replace, on the A model at any rate, I'm not going to bother with it on the D, but on the A it will replace the Tamiya plastic bulkheads. But I want to really preserve this part, which is a frame, if you like, which contains the roof of the nose bay here with some detail in it, but it's also a support for the cockpit assembly, so the cockpit sits on top of that. So I'd like to try and preserve this for structural purposes. It keeps the fuselage halves at the correct distance, or the correct width, and it just adds some strength to this nose assembly, so I want to try and preserve that. The problem is that this detail prevents the resin bay from fitting properly, so I want to grind all this off so that this will fit in and I'll still be able to use the Tamiya plate. So because there's quite a bit of detail to remove from this part, I'm just going to use a mill in the motor tool and gradually work away at this until we've got a flat surface ready for the resin bay. The nose gear leg here, or the top part of it, is from the Detail and Wonder undercarriage set, and that's just been modified with the side pins narrowed down so that it will fit into this piece. If you're doing that with the Tamiya kit, it's a bit easier because you can just build up the undercarriage bulkheads around the top of the nose gear leg. Now I just want to grind off a little bit more, thin this out a little bit, just to make the fit of the undercarriage bay a little bit more snug. Now the problem is it's getting a bit thin and flexible, so what I'll do is glue the cockpit to it in its correct position, and I'll just stiffen things up a little bit. So we'll just continue to thin this down. Step by step, just until we get a nice snug fit of this undercarriage bay. Okay, so let's just very carefully get this bay into the correct position. Just want to line it up so it's nice and straight and it's flush all the way around the edges. And now with it in the correct position, I can just dab a little bit of extra thin in there just to lock it onto this plate. I don't want to glue it onto the fuselage parts yet, just this plate. Just leave that to set up for a minute. A little bit more down at the front. Just a tiny drop. All I want to do is just tack it really. Okay, that's set. So if we now peel the fuselage apart, that bay should come away with the cockpit floor. And with it off, I'll just add a little bit more glue just to make sure it's absolutely solid. So with that locked in place, I can now paint the bay, and probably I'll do a little bit of painting around the reveal at the bottom of the fuselage just to make sure that we don't get any grey plastic showing. But that's gone in pretty well really. The detail on this is absolutely fantastic, and hopefully the paint should bring that out even more. So the next job is to remove the throttle quadrant. I didn't do it originally because I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to get a replacement for it, but I found this, which is a 3D printed set. I'll leave the details in the video description for this, but these are printed myself. What you buy are basically the files to load into your printer to print these, and the detail on these is far cleaner than the kit parts and the more accurate as well. This throttle quadrant in particular is a lot better than the moulded plastic, and we'll get some close-ups of these parts just so you can see them in a little bit more detail. What the print file comprises is the throttle quadrant, the main control column for the pilot, and the other control column or joysticks for the pilot and the rear crew member. So that's a really nice detail to add to the model. As I said, they're a lot better than the kit parts. So what we can do now that I know I've got the replacement, is I can just sand the throttle quadrant off flush with the rest of the panel. And actually what I'll do is just carve that off to start with. nice new sharp chisel blade will do the job on most of it. And then we'll just sand that flush. We'll do the other one for the D. Obviously, being a 3D print file, you can do as many of these as you want. And glue these panels in place now. Okay, I'm just working on these combings now with the canvas covers on them. And these are for the D, these two, which I've already started to try to just enhance the canvas detail on the parts. They're ready. I'm going to do the A version next. And basically all I'm doing with these is to apply some liquid cement onto the parts where the canvas is represented, and that's going to help us just rough up the surface. Just come in a little bit. So this is Tamiya extra thin standard set. We'll just let that melt into the top surface for a little bit, and we'll just get a toothpick and start to just rub into the surface. And what I'm just trying to do is to lift up some of the molten plastic and just rub it around a little bit, so you get kind of strings of molten plastic. It looks pretty rough to start with, but it'll come good in the end. Just putting little scores and creases in the surface. And then we'll go back in with some more cement just to smooth it down a little bit. And you can play around with this for a while until you get it to the sort of stage that you want. And it also just enables you to play around with the surface. Just etch it a little bit more, blend it in, and move the liquid plastic around. If you do it too much, you could just come back with the cocktail stick, get some more creases in. The thing to do here is just to avoid the moulded detail on top. We've got the frame for the hood, which we don't want to touch. We don't want to get this glue on that, because that'll just soften that detail, which we want to keep crisp. So just be careful where you're putting the glue. So this stringy glue is your friend really, because it gives you a chance to mould that back into the canvas. Gives you lots of creases and irregularities, which is what you want. Hopefully this will come up nicely under a coat of paint and a dry brush over the top. We also have this cover here to the left of the pilot station, so we'll do the same with that. So with all the parts prepped for the cockpit, I'll give them a coat of primer. I'm going to actually use some black, Mr. Surfacer 1500 black on these. Gives a really nice smooth surface to get the top colours on, and then we'll just be able to drift some of the grey cockpit colour in and hopefully start to get some shading on the parts. So primer next. For the D version, I've done another bit of 3D printing for this hood frame here, which replaces the solid Tamiya part. As you can see, that's an open frame on that, so it's a little bit nicer, a bit finer, more refined. And on the rear combing here, we've also got this, what looks like a handle and some sort of equipment box on top, and that's just a little bit nicer than the Tamiya part as well. So both of those prints come on the same file, and again I'll leave the reference for that in the video description if you've got a printer and want to print those yourself. Got the grey on, just misted on over the black primer. In this case I've used the Tamiya call out for XF19, that's sky grey, and that's fine by me. To be honest, I don't really get that excited about the exact shade of cockpit greys. By the time you've got them over a black base, done the weathering, got some washes on these, the colour alters quite a bit. So really what you're looking for is the final effect, rather than, as I said, get too excited about the base colour. Looks okay. So I'm going to gloss these over now, and then we can apply a weathering wash, pick out some detail painting, and get the decals applied, the 3D decals. Just picking out some detail now, and you'll notice that I've given all these parts a coat of gloss varnish. That's so that I can give these a weathering wash just to bring out some of the detail. I just want to add a little bit more colour first of all. These are the canvas areas that I worked on earlier on in the video. I just want a base coat of khaki, which is Tamiya XF49. And Tamiya acrylic paints reasonably well if you thin it properly. This is probably getting on for 40% thinners. Just going to try a little bit of dry brushing now with some buff. This is Tamiya buff, just to see if we can bring out some of that moulding that I did earlier on. I'm just using some Tamiya brown panel liner now, just to bring out some of the detail on these pieces. All these have been gloss coated, so the panel liner just runs into the detail. Gives us some nice shadows. Okay, time for the 3D decals in the cockpit. Now in this case we're doing the A. I've already done the D, applied all those, and that looks quite nice. And for those of you that have never used 3D decals before, there are one or two little tricks with them, which hopefully I'll show you now. These are the belts. We're not going to be using the Quinta Studios belts. I don't like 3D belts in general, they just don't look right. so I'll be passing those on somewhere. In the main, these go on in a similar way to ordinary decals, in the sense that you release them from the backing paper in water, and they do have an adhesive on them, but I like to add some additional glue in the form of some white canopy glue. It just strengthens the bond a little bit. I don't quite trust the adhesive on the decals themselves. So we'll just start with the side consoles on the main cockpit tub. At this stage, to apply the decals, we've done all the detail painting, such as it is, and also flat coated the whole assembly again. So all the individual parts have been flat coated, and that's a little different to normal decals, of course, where you generally apply them over a gloss or a semi-gloss surface, but you don't need to, because you're using the canopy glue. We don't need to do that. So just cut the decal out as normal and just drop that into some water. I'm just going to put a few spots of the canopy glue. So these release really quickly, just a matter of seconds really in water, that's all they need. And then just drop them in place. It's as easy as that. We've got space here at the front for the throttle quadrant, which will fit once all the decals are in place. Make sure it's in the right position, and then once it's in place we can just mop up any excess canopy glue. In this case I'm using a Tamiya cotton bud. These are the sharpened ones. They're a bit more easy to use than standard cotton buds that you might get in a chemist shop, and it's as easy as that. Do another couple. One thing I really like about these Quinta Studios 3D decals for the instruments is that the clear glass faces don't need any treatment. They're glossy to start with, and that's really nice on things like the radar screens. It gives you a really nice effect without any effort really. I'll show you when I do the main screens. You'll be able to see how nice the effect looks. You can use an ordinary cotton bud just to tamp these down a little bit, make sure that they're nice and flat. Sometimes a difficulty with applying aftermarket panels is that it's hard to match the colours sometimes, and sometimes the colours are a bit off for the background greys in this case. But it's not too bad. They're a little bit light on the decal. What you can do if you're not happy with that is just to get some of the original XF19 in this case and just touch them in very lightly. I won't in this case because the slightly different grey just adds a little bit of interest to the cockpit. Okay, so you get the idea. I'll press on and apply the rest of these panel decals, then with one or two other little bits and pieces, and I'll show you the screens, how they look on the instrument panels. So just talking a little bit about these parts that are black in the cockpit. So we're talking about the throttle quadrant here, this 3D print that I've done myself, and the two control columns that we're going to be using on the A. It's just worth, I think, doing a little bit of dry brushing on them, because on such a small part as this, painted black, you just tend to lose it. It just looks like a black shadow in the cockpit. But a little bit of dry brushing with, in this case, some German grey, Tamiya German grey, just catches, if you do it very lightly, it just catches the edges of the detail, and it just draws the eye to the shape of the part and just makes it a little more visible once it's down in the cockpit. So it's worth doing. And the other thing with a part like this, which is the top of the cockpit surround if you like, Tamiya have moulded a little bit of detail into this. So we've got the locks all down the side and some rivet detail as well on them. And again, just to highlight the shape of the openings, a little bit of a dry brush will bring all that out. The key to this is just to take it very steadily and very slowly with a tiny amount of paint on the brush. This is an old paintbrush, just a flat chisel paintbrush. You can get specialised dry brushes, but I don't bother. I've got some, but I usually use these that I've used for a while. So if you haven't done this before, I know that most people do a bit of dry brushing on the models these days, but if you haven't, give it a go, and I'm convinced that you'll see a difference. Nice and steady, and eventually you will see the detail revealing itself. If you're dry brushing resin parts, particularly ones that you've printed yourself, just be careful when you're using a dry brush, because I've found the resin that I've used very brittle and it won't stand any mistreatment, particularly tiny fine parts like this throttle quadrant. So I'll just finish off the detail painting on the control column, the main pilot's control column, and then we'll finish these cockpits up. That's the A done. I've also done most of the D as well. I just need to assemble the kit nose undercarriage bay. So I'll do that next, then we can get both of these into the fuselage halves. So this is the kit nose bay, and as you can see, I've painted all the elements separately. That's my usual method, and it's just because I find it hard to get paint into the recessed detail and into all the undercuts once the undercarriage bay is assembled. Whereas doing it this way, you're able to make sure that all the areas are covered properly. So not too much to do on this, just one or two parts. It obviously doesn't build up to as accurate a replica as the 3D printed bay on the A, but it's okay for me. So these parts clip together really nicely. That's all we need to do at this stage. Obviously we'll build this up more later on with the lower part of the leg. cockpit fits on top of that. We can get these together now. Just before I do, just to say that I find it just as well to paint around the edges of the fuselage. So here I've got the black around the cockpit. That's just to guard against any grey plastic showing through when you come to put the cockpit in. And the same with the area around the undercarriage bay. I've painted that white as well. It's just easier to do it at this stage. Right, so with the cockpits done, you can get them fitted into the nose fuselage halves. Start with the A. Now this doesn't actually need any glue. It's such a good fit with this base plate that the part just clips in really. And I'm okay with that because you're always going to run the risk of getting a bit of glue onto the painted surfaces. So if we can get away with it, we will. Let's get the two halves joined together now. These have been test fitted a few times, so I know that they're going to go together. Some nice oozing of the glue out the bottom, that will help us with cleanup. Do the same with the D. These underside panels are a nice fit, but I'm going to leave them off for the moment because I want to clean up the radome parts first before I do that. It's just easier to avoid damaging the engraved panel detail on this plate, so that can go in later on. Okay, so that's all nicely done. I'll get some photographs of the cockpit. You'll be able to see them better on some stills. And that takes us up to step 9 in the Tamiya instructions in both kits. And one thing I didn't mention, of course, was the seats. Obviously I haven't put them in yet, and that's because I'm going to be using these two sets from Minicraft Collection for the GRU 7s in the A and the SJU 17s in the D. These are really nicely done, and these are the centerpiece really of a cockpit, so I want to spend some time getting those just right. Hopefully they'll look nice when they're in. And next time what I want to do is build the rest of the fuselage up basically, and that'll have to include the wings because of the wing fold mechanism. But hopefully by the end of part 2 we'll have a completed airframe. So moving on fairly nicely, and that's really down to Tamiya's fantastic fit. You're not really going to have any difficulty messing about with fit on this one. The complicating factor of course is the resin Wheelbay. That creates slightly more work for the A, but they're pretty well designed and went in nicely. So I'll leave it there everybody, and as I said, get some photographs for you, and hopefully it won't be too long before I post part 2 of this double build. In the meantime, look after yourselves and enjoy your modelling. See you soon. Bye for now.